over a campfire. Chapter 2. The journey begins. The sun had barely lifted itself above the horizon, casting warm, honeyed streaks across the dew-speckled lawns of Willow Creek Academy. The school stood like an old guardian at the edge of town, its red brick walls soaked with decades of chalk dust, laughter, and memory. It was a sprawling campus, two main buildings connected by a covered walkway, their windows tall and narrow, bordered by ivy that had crawled upward over the years like curious green fingers. A broad courtyard stretched in front, paved with age-worn stones and flanked by rows of flowering shrubs and benches carved from stone. Off to the side was a modest playground where children hooped and squealed, their voices rising in sharp contrast to the sleepy chirping of morning birds. The scent of freshly mown grass mingled with a lingering aroma of cafeteria pancakes and syrup wafting from an open window. The courtyard was alive. Children were everywhere, racing across cobblestones, their backpacks bouncing against their backs, clumps of friends chatting animatedly near the flagpole. A group of boys tossing a basketball that thudded rhythmically as it bounced off concrete and hands. It was a special day, a day marked on calendars and circled with bright colors weeks ago, the 3-day nature camp. 20 students from grade 7 had been selected for the trip, and excitement hummed in the air like static. A yellow school bus stood idling at the curb, its windows slightly fogged from the contrast between the warm interiors and the cool morning air. The driver, a middle-aged man with sun-darkened skin and a baseball cap pulled low, leaned against the side of the bus sipping coffee from a chipped thermos. 3 teachers bustled about nearby, trying to manage the chaos with varying degrees of success. The head teacher, Ms. Blakely, was a tall, slender woman with sharp eyes and a clipboard that seemed surgically attached to her hand. She wore sensible shoes, a no-nonsense ponytail, and a whistle that dangled from her neck but had yet to be used, though she seemed mere seconds away from doing so. "Line up. Everyone line up," Ms. Blakely called, voice slicing through the chatter like a blade. "If I don't do a head count, no one's getting on this bus." Some students groaned, but most obeyed, gathering into a semi-disorganized row. Beside her stood Mr. Hahn, a soft-spoken man with a perpetual smile and glasses that slid down his nose every few seconds, and Ms. Jordan, the youngest of the 3 teachers, only a few years out of college, with her arms full of clipboards, a water bottle, and a duffel bag stuffed to bursting. 1, 2, 3. Ms. Blakely began counting, tapping her pen against the clipboard as her eyes moved down the list of names. 14, 15. She paused and squinted. 17, 18. She looked up, scanning the row. 19. I think Jason went to the bathroom," someone offered. "No," another student said, snickering. "He's probably still at home eating cereal in his pajamas." A ripple of laughter passed through the group. Ms. Blakely pursed her lips. "That boy." Just then, as if summoned by sheer frustration, Jason Whitman came hurtling down the sidewalk, his shoelaces undone, his hoodie half-zipped, and a slice of toast clamped between his teeth. His hair looked like it had waged war with a pillow, and lost. He stumbled as he reached the group, breathing hard, eyes wide with mock innocence. Sorry, my alarm didn't go off," he gasped, toast crumbs flying. Ms. Blakely narrowed her eyes. "Jason, this is the 3rd time this month you've been late. You're lucky we haven't left without you." "I had to pack," he said, blinking as if that were a valid excuse. "And my mom couldn't find my hiking boots." "I don't want to hear it," she snapped. "Get in line, and tie your shoes before you break your neck." Jason scurried to his spot in the row, grinning sheepishly at the others, who greeted him with light-hearted teasing. Miss Collins cleared her throat to cut through the lively chatter. With a careful eye scanning the students, she asked in a firm but kind voice, "All right, everyone, before we get too comfortable, let's make sure you've all packed the essentials. Do you have your sleeping bags, water bottles, and raincoats? What about insect repellent and flashlights? Remember, we're heading into the wilderness, so it's important to be prepared." A few students shuffled nervously, patting their backpacks or giving thumbs up, while others exchanged quick glances, hoping they hadn't forgotten something crucial. Ms. Collins gave a knowing smile and added, "If you're missing anything, now's the time to speak up. There's no turning back once we get there." Her question reminded everyone that while the trip was exciting, it was also serious business, and being prepared was key to having a safe and fun adventure. With the final headcount confirmed, the group was finally allowed to begin boarding the bus. One by one, they climbed the steps, lugging their backpacks and sleeping bags, which bumped and jostled against seats as they found places to sit. There was a flurry of last-minute seat negotiations, best friends ensuring they sat together, some students pulling out snacks already, others claiming window seats as though their lives depended on it. Just as the last few students were climbing aboard, a loud argument broke out near the middle of the bus. Dan Weston, tall, competitive, and always quick to claim what he thought he deserved, was in a heated standoff with Caleb Morris, a wiry boy with a stubborn streak and a sharp tongue. The source of their clash? A window seat. Dan had tossed his backpack onto it the second he boarded, marking it as his territory. But Caleb, who swore he'd called it, while they were still in the school hallway, wasn't backing down. "You can't just throw your bag and walk away like it's yours," Caleb snapped, gripping the seat's edge. "I literally touched it before you even came in." Dan shot back, inching closer. The other students nearby exchanged amused looks, whispering and giggling behind their hands. It wasn't the first time Dan and Caleb had locked horns. Both were known for turning small things into full-blown contests. Their tug-of-war over backpacks and bragging rights escalated until Ms. Rayner appeared, marching down the aisle like a thunderstorm in motion. Her eyes flashed with the kind of calm fury that instantly silenced any room. "Enough, both of you," she said sharply, her tone cutting through the chatter. "If you two think fighting over a seat is the way to start this trip, you're sorely mistaken." She crossed her arms, her gaze hard. "Neither of you gets the seat." Dan and Caleb looked stunned. "But," Dan began. "No buts," she said. "Maya." She turned to the quiet girl standing just a few rows away, clutching her book and waiting patiently. "You may sit here instead." Maya's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but she nodded and made her way to the seat without a word, sliding in with quiet dignity. Dan and Caleb, meanwhile, were directed to separate corners of the bus, Dan near the back with the rowdy kids, Caleb up front next to the teachers. As they walked away, muttering under their breath, the rest of the students smirked knowingly. Gina, watching from a few rows behind with Hannah and Mike, leaned forward and whispered, "Honestly, they both deserved it." Mike chuckled. "Dan always has to win, even if it's a window." Hannah smiled faintly, still new to these kinds of school trip dramas. To her, it was all part of the strange and thrilling energy buzzing in the air, uncertain, unscripted, and unlike anything she'd known before. On the bus, the air was alive with conversation and nervous anticipation. Students spoke in overlapping threads, voices layering like chaotic symphonies. Some gossiped about who packed what, who would forget their toothbrush, and whether or not the cabins would be haunted. A cluster near the back was already engaged in a heated debate over the camp's rumored obstacle course. "I heard it's over 100 feet long," said Mia, eyes wide behind round glasses. "Uffed," scoffed Darnell. "My cousin went last year. He said there's this huge rope swing over a lake, and if you fall, you land in freezing water." "No way," exclaimed Ava, leaning over the seat. "We're not doing that, are we?" "Maybe it's optional," replied someone else nervously. "I hope there are wild animals," said Rory with misplaced bravado. "I want to see a bear." "You want to get eaten by one, you mean?" retorted Zoe. Laughter burst from the back, while at the front, quieter students watched the trees blur by through the window. The city was beginning to thin out, giving way to more open spaces. Apartment buildings faded behind them, replaced with small homes, then larger plots of land, and finally long, unbroken stretches of green. Billboards gave way to road signs. Telephone poles gave way to groves of trees. The hum of the tires on asphalt and the occasional honk of a horn were slowly being replaced by the rustle of leaves and the occasional bird call drifting in through a half-open window. Toward the middle of the bus, one girl sat silently by the window, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her backpack pressed close to her side. Her name was Hannah Carlisle. She was 12 years old, with long dark hair tucked behind her ears and a quiet, observant manner. Unlike her peers, who leaned into the chaos like fish in water, Hannah sat still, watching the world slip past the window in streaks of green and gold. But Hannah wasn't alone. Just across the aisle, Slouched with his headphones loosely hanging around his neck, sat Mike Liu. He was lanky and full of nervous energy, constantly fiddling with something. His shoelaces, his hoodie strings, the zipper on his backpack. Mike had been Hannah's best friend since 3rd grade when he gave her his extra chocolate milk after she spilled hers in the cafeteria. That was the beginning of their trio, a tight-knit circle completed by Gina Alvarez, who currently sat directly behind Hannah, braiding a purple ribbon into her long, glossy hair with casual precision. Gina was the kind of girl who could hold court without trying. Confident, expressive, and always up to date on the latest school gossip. While Hannah was introspective and observant, and Mike was energetic but often distracted, Gina had a grounded clarity that kept the three of them balanced. Theirs was the kind of friendship that didn't need constant words to feel solid. It was built on shared lunches, whispered jokes during assemblies, and long afternoons after school inventing games or doing homework side by side. "Hey," Mike leaned across the aisle slightly, flicking a rolled-up piece of paper at Hannah. "You think we're really going to have to survive in the wild for 3 days?" Hannah turned to him, blinking slowly. "You brought 3 packs of gummy bears and a portable charger for a flashlight. I think you'll survive." Gina laughed from behind. "Barely. Mike doesn't even survive the school week without snacks." "Hey," Mike said in mock protest. "That's because you two keep stealing them." "I consider it a friendship tax," Gina said, peeking over the seat and flashing a grin. Hannah smiled, her eyes softening. "Besides, we're not surviving the wild. We're just doing a few hikes, some team building, and probably singing around a fire." "You make it sound so tame," Mike said dramatically. "I was picturing wild wolves and hunting for berries." "You wouldn't last an hour without Wi-Fi," Gina teased. Mike clutched his chest. "You wound me." The three of them burst into laughter, a quiet, shared bubble of joy in the middle of the larger noise around them. It was these kinds of moments that made Hannah feel most at ease, safe in the company of people who truly knew her. She was the type who didn't talk much in big groups, but would open up completely with the right 2 people. And those 2 people were right here, within arm's reach. Gina leaned forward again, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you think the cabins will have bunk beds?" "They'd better," Mike said. "I call top bunk." "You always fall off the top bunk," Hannah reminded him gently. "Fine. I call middle bunk." "There is no middle bunk," Gina said flatly. "There should be," he muttered. "Don't worry," Hannah said, turning back to the window. "We'll figure it out. We always do." It was Hannah's first time going on a camp. More so, first time going out without strict supervision of her parents. She had packed the night before, neatly, carefully, checking off every item on the list twice. Her mother had made her favorite sandwiches and reminded her a dozen times to wear sunscreen. Her father, who had taken the morning off just to walk her to school, had told her, "Take it all in, sweetheart. Nature has a way of teaching you things you don't learn in class." At first, Hannah wasn't sure what that meant. But now, as the bus rolled farther away from the city, she thought she might be starting to understand. The air looked different here. Lighter, maybe. Fuller. It was in the way the fields stretched without end, the way the sun dappled across tree leaves, casting patches of gold over the earth like coins. She had lived her whole life surrounded by buildings and streetlights, by the rhythm of honking cars and crowded sidewalks. But now there were open skies, winding roads, hills that rolled like waves in the distance. "Isn't this cool?" her seatmate whispered. Lena, a girl with curly hair and an unfiltered mouth. "I hope we see deer. Or maybe a fox. Or owls. Do you like owls?" Hannah smiled softly. "Yeah, I do." The bus jerked slightly as it turned onto a narrower road, gravel crunching beneath its wheels. The students' chatter grew louder with every minute. Ms. Blakely made her way down the aisle, reminding students to remain seated and to keep their voices to an indoor volume, a term that seemed impossible to enforce among a group of 7th graders on the brink of adventure. Backpacks slid from overhead shelves. Someone's water bottle rolled down the aisle. A half-unzipped duffel spilled a cascade of socks onto the floor, prompting shrieks and laughter. Jason, now fully awake, was dramatically retelling the story of how he barely escaped his front door before the bus left, embellishing it with every telling. "You guys don't know stress," he said, leaning over the seat in front of him. "I had one sock on, the other in my mouth, my bag half zipped, and my mom yelling at me from the stairs like, "Jason, you forgot your toothbrush." It was wild. "Dude," someone laughed. "That's just called being late." "Let the man have his moment," added another. "It's the most exercise he's done all year." Jason bowed theatrically in his seat. Thank you, thank you. I'll be here all week." Literally. Laughter filled the bus again, a rolling wave of youthful exuberance. The teachers exchanged tired but fond glances. Miss Jordan finally sank into her seat near the front, pulling out a travel mug and sighing. "Mr." Han peered out the window with a dreamy expression, quietly humming an old tune under his breath. Outside, the terrain had shifted entirely. No more concrete, no more storefronts. Now there were dense woods on either side, tall pine trees rising like sentinels. Occasionally, the canopy broke, revealing meadows that danced with wildflowers or creeks that glistened like glass. The road dipped and curved, the sky above stretching wide and cloudless. As the bus rumbled steadily out of the city, the cramped space buzzed with lively energy. Students shuffled in their seats, exchanging bags and trading snacks like secret treasures. Sarah leaned over to Mike, a sly grin on her face as she whispered, "I'll give you 2 gummies for a chocolate bar." Mike eyed the colorful candy wrappers in her hand and chuckled. "Deal, but only if you throw in a cookie." Nearby, Gina giggled as she handed her homemade peanut butter cookies to Hannah, who took one eagerly. "You have to try these. They're my grandma's recipe," Gina said proudly. Hannah bit into the cookie, her eyes widening with delight. From the back of the bus, a small group broke into song. Gina, Mike, and a few others launched into a raucous, off-key rendition of a popular Campfire tune. "I'm not singing unless you all sing louder," Mike teased, nudging Hannah. Soon, the whole group was laughing and singing along, their voices echoing softly off the windows. Not far away, Dan, Caleb, and a couple of boys from their class huddled around a deck of cards. "I'm telling you, I've got a winning hand," Dan boasted, flicking his cards with practiced ease. Caleb smirked, matching his rival's confidence. "We'll see about that." Quiet bets were made, with low whispers of "your move" and "no way" punctuating the gentle hum of the engine. Cheers and groans erupted with each turn, adding a playful tension to the cozy bus atmosphere. The blend of chatter, music, and the gentle thrum of the engine created a warm, familiar soundtrack, a perfect backdrop for the beginning of their adventure. It was about an hour on the road, and the excitement on the bus had softened into something more hushed. Some students had grown quiet, lulled by the rhythm of the road. Others stared out the windows, faces pressed to glass, their expressions painted with wonder. Hannah leaned her head against the window, her breath fogging a small patch of the glass. Her reflection looked back at her, faint and soft, eyes wide with quiet amazement. She watched as a hawk soared above a ridge, its wings outstretched and glinting in the morning sun. She saw trees that seemed taller than anything she'd ever seen in the city. She saw freedom. The trees continued to roll past in a blur of green and gold. But inside the bus, surrounded by her best friends, Hannah felt something rare and shimmering take root deep in her chest. It wasn't just excitement, it was possibility. The sense that these 3 days might become one of those core memories, the kind you looked back on for years with a wistful smile. The road stretched on, winding like a ribbon into the unknown.